Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. This is our Zettelkasten week, and today is Tuesday, our map day, where we get to go into some detail on what we're going to be putting into our Zettelkastens this month. Victoria, you want to lead us off?
Absolutely. So, narrative distance, as you may recall, is the distance that the reader feels between themselves as the reader and the character or the narrator or potentially the events in the story. So you're looking at what does that spectrum look like? Well, what I want you to think of as you're looking at how do you put this into your notebook, how do you get this section started? Just start thinking about the three areas that I gave you to potentially write about or think about. The first one being the psychic distance. Remember, that's when you can either be up close and really see the internal story, the internal thoughts of the character, or you can be further away and maybe you're observing that character through another character, maybe through dialogue or through commentary. So in terms of psychic distance, that would be one section. So that's where you're just examining, do I want my reader to be close up right inside this character's thoughts? Or do I want this reader to be far away and maybe observing them either from a distance in terms of how they're visualizing that scene, or maybe through the thoughts or the actions or the dialogue of another character? So put your psychic distance section in there and just start playing around with how can I show my reader this character both close up and far away psychically. That means through their thoughts. The second section is your spatial distance. That's you're either close focused in physically on the character. John's feet were freezing. There was snow falling in his collar, causing his neck to sting. You're very physically close. Or you're far away. The man stepped out onto the porch and observed the snowfall. Not much information there. That's pretty far away and vague. So play with space as a second option. If for some reason writing that scene or that character or interaction from a psychic standpoint doesn't work, play with space. See if maybe you can put in a description or some exposition in that regard. Your third example you may recall is temporal. That's playing with time. So maybe you try to write a close psychic distance and you're trying to get into Annie's anxiety and it's just not working. So then maybe you try to do it spatially and you write a character observing her from across the room, trying to get that anxiety right, and that's not working either. Maybe the third option then is you go to temporal, you go to playing with space and time. How do you play with temporal distance? What if you demonstrate her anxiety using flashback, right? Then you can show the reader without showing them in real time by playing with the timeline. So those are three really great ways to game out your scenarios, game out what you're doing with your characters and how that relates to your reader so that you control the distance between them and thereby control what your reader is getting from the text. So that's all I'm going to give you for this week. You've got 3 homework assignments. That's to build out a psychic distance section, a spatial distance section, and a temporal distance section. And then give yourself some examples in there and just noodle around with it and see what you come up with. Next week, we'll talk about, in our writing week, what that noodling looks like. So get your section started because next week we're going to put it to use. Kathleen?
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. Wow, thanks for the review, too, of all the 3 types of distances. I look forward to starting to collect some cards for my Zettelkasten in that regard. Well, we've been studying courtesy, and we've taken a look at it from a definitional standpoint, from the win and the loss and the victory and all of the different ways that we can study courtesy. Well, now we're ready to put courtesy into our Zettelkasten. How are we going to put it in there? Well, you could put a definition card in there. That wouldn't hurt a bit. What does it mean and all of that you've learned about the different voices. But one of the things that would be really valuable for your writing is if you put courtesy in your experience collection. Well, what experiences? I'm going to have you step back and be the observer and not the actor. Why? Because you have courtesy in the base position, and that's not going to give your story very much variety. You're just nice all the time, and that just isn't going to give enough variety to your story, as pleasant as it is to be around you. What I want you to do is think about experiences where you've been on the receiving end It touches you just as emotionally, and maybe even more so because it has that distance, but it's courtesy has this natural that it's one-on-one. So it's specific to you. It's not like watching somebody's face across the room. It's how somebody treated you. So I want you to think about the past or be on the lookout in the present for times when you have been directly affected by somebody whose courtesy was in the pinnacle. No idea of courtesy whatsoever, not even thinking about courtesy. Whap, 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 flying through life without any thought of courtesy. How did you feel? Did somebody just let go of the door and it almost hit you in the face? How did that make you feel? What did it look like? What did you observe? How could you tell that he had courtesy in the pinnacle? Capture that. Capture that moment on an experience card. Save it in your Zettelkasten. It'll come up in another story. How about courtesy in the wing position? Someone who has courtesy in the wing position obviously thinks it's rather optional now, doesn't he? This might be the person who is just can barely say hi to you when you come into the office, but, oh, would you do me this favor? I really need to have this. Could you help me with this? Now all of a sudden they're dripping with courtesy. How did that feel? Could you tell that, yeah, that's not your normal behavior, is it now? And you can capture that experience on a card as well. Put it in your experience collection. It can show up in one of your stories. About courtesy in the rudder position. Now that's a tough one to think about. Now it's a little bit difficult because you can't really go into a person's head to decide what are they thinking about, whether to be courteous or not. But sometimes you just almost can. You can watch somebody observing someone from across the room and seeing, oh, here's a stranger talking to my boss. I don't know who that person is. How is the boss treating this person? Is the boss seem like he's liking that person? Oh, yeah. Okay. I better be nice to that person. Was the boss seeming like he's being dismissive of that person? Oh, okay, then I don't need to worry about it. So that might be a harder one. That's going to be your challenging one. Keep an eye out for that one, or maybe something that you've read in a story or you see in a TV show. That's going to be your hard one to capture, but see if you can possibly capture that. And then hopefully you're just surrounded by loving people with at least courtesy in the anchor position, where most of the time they're very nice and very pleasant and very courteous. And if they're not very kind and pleasant, there's some kind of a problem. Like, oh, Martha wasn't very pleasant this morning. I wonder if she's feeling okay. And that's almost your clue to see how she's doing. And hopefully you'll have lots and lots and lots and lots of experiences like that you can put into your experience collection. Now you're going to want to look at variety. Any of these where you have a lot of them available, look at different varieties of them. What makes them feel different? How many different ones can you capture so that you can show courtesy showing up in different ways in your stories? Don't feel like you have to make just one experience card for courtesy. And then, of course, courtesy in the base position. Well, just think of yourself and think of how do you approach the day. That'll be the one where you can put yourself in the active role. Because, of course, I know you have courtesy in the base position. Think about that, build your character cards into it, and like Victoria said, we'll be consulting them again in our writing week. So, Victoria, do you have anything to add?
It's just always fantastic how nicely these things just dovetail together. I love when you talked about being an observer and not an actor. That's something that beautifully captures another facet of narrative distance. Because if you consider the reader as an observer and the actor as a character, and you're asking how did it feel in a particular situation, that's exactly what we're talking about with narrative distance, is how do you get your reader to feel what you want from that character? So gold in that concept. Keep that in your back pocket. This is one for the books because we went deep into a lot of concepts that you can play with to really bring that reader in. Your job is to get it into your Zettelkasten and then come back next week so we can figure out how to write about it So, Kathleen, if anybody wants to share with us, where should they go?
You should come on over to LiLLiPub.org. And LiLLiPub.org, we have an incredible writing group that Victoria leads every Saturday. You can post your writing and get some critique on it from Victoria and from your fellow writers. We get together every Saturday and we have a wonderful time doing that. Besides, we also have a number of groups within LiLLiPub. We have a group for Zettelkasten, we have a group for character traits, and we have book clubs, and we just get together in the library and hang out and share what's going on in our lives. People post great interviews with authors, links to them that you might enjoy. What makes a good notebook? What kind of notebooks do people use? Where do they take their notes besides Zettelkasten? There's so much going on in LiLLiPub. It's really a great community, and you will never, ever in social media, you will not find a nicer community than LiLLiPub.org. I hope you'll find some ties, but you won't find any nicer because we're right up there at the top. So come on over to LiLLiPub, and we will see you next week for Writing Week. Talk to you later. Bye.